And we are live. For those of you who are just listening in, welcome to Capitalism is a Death Cult, done by the Canadian Commie. I am responding to people during my live stream on YouTube in the comment section. If you would like to participate, I live stream 6 to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. You can head over to www.thecanadiancommie.com in order to be directed to said live stream. If you would like to participate, if you would like to join in, if you would like to donate, please head over to patreon.com/thecanadiancommie in order to support the revolution. I make no bones about this. I am attempting to become a professional revolutionary. As Lenin wrote, what we need is professional revolutionaries, and it is going to be professional revolutionaries that get us out of this absolute disaster mess that we all find ourselves in because of the failed ideology of capitalism. Capitalism has become a religious ideology exclusively. It is not interested in solving your problems. It is not interested in building a society. It is not interested in trying to improve the quality of your life. It is not interested in trying to protect you. It's not interested in any of that. The only thing that capitalism is interested in doing at this point is extracting as much value as it possibly can out of the society until it can extract no more, and then abandoning you. So, people like me are ahead of the game and are leading the charge against this ridiculous nonsense, because we should probably, build a civil society. Don't you think? I do. Compton, good to see you. Peanut Butter Beatrice, good evening to you. Joe Anthony, a pleasure. Peanut Butter Beatrice writes, hope the heat isn't too bad where you are. It is. It is. It's a bad heat day today. This is apparently the peak, and we're heading on down from here. I am looking forward to it. Fiddleford, good to see you over on Twitch. EggsD, over on YouTube. Good to see you, my man. Austin Wallace, good to see you guys. So, the big story of the day. I say we just jump right into it. Hamas political chief Ismail Haniyeh assassinated in Iran. This has the potential to kick off a fairly major conflict, I should say. Hamas's political chief, Ismail Haniyeh, has been assassinated in Iran's capital, Tehran. According to a statement from the group that runs the besieged and bombarded Gaza Strip, which blamed Israel for his killing. Haniyeh and one of his bodyguards were killed in the early hours of Wednesday after the building where they were staying was struck, the statement said. The Islamic resistance movement Hamas mourns to our great Palestinian people, to the Arab and Islamic nation, and to all the free people of the world. Brother, leader, martyr. Oh. Mujahid Ismail Haniyeh, the head of the movement, who was killed in a treacherous Zionist raid on his residence in Tehran, it added. Israel has yet to confirm or deny its involvement in the killing of Haniyeh, who was in Tehran to attend the inauguration ceremony of Iran's president, Mossad Pezeshkian, on Tuesday. Speaking on Wednesday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that Israel had delivered crushing blows to Iran's proxies in recent days, including Hamas and Hezbollah. Netanyahu did not directly address Haniyeh's killing, but vowed to exact a heavy price for any aggression against us from any arena. The news of the assassination has sparked anger across Palestine and stoked fears about a wider regional conflict in the wake of Israel's war on Gaza, now in its 10th month. Lebanon's Iran-backed Hezbollah and Israel have been exchanging fire over their border, while Yemen's Houthi rebels have been assaulting Israeli-linked ships in the Red Sea and other waters. At least 39,440 Palestinians have been killed in Israel's war, now in its 10th month, with more than 91,000 wounded. Israel began attacking Gaza, promising to eliminate Hamas and kill its leaders after the group launched an attack on October 7th in southern Israel that led to the killing of some 1,139 people and more than 200 being taken captive, taking more than 200 others captive. So the big reason why this is such a big deal is that this fellow, the Hamas political chief, was essentially the head negotiator. Right? That this is essentially Israel saying, we are not interested in negotiations. We are not going to engage in negotiations. We are not going to care about negotiations. We are, in fact, going to launch assassinations against the head negotiator of the organization that we claim to be organizing and negotiating with. In my view, this kills any chance of any kind of peaceful resolution to this conflict. I know that is a big statement to make, but I fundamentally think that it is true. That if you are going to go to the house of the head negotiator and assassinate him, you are fundamentally saying peace is not an option. I think that this puts Israel on the dark path. I think that this puts Israel on the path of no return. That there always was a hope that Israel would actually come to its senses, and that Israel would actually attempt to find some kind of way out of this that wasn't simply war. Meanwhile, Isaac comes in saying a coup d'etat is in progress in Venezuela. Yeah, you just described Venezuelan politics for the last 20 years, my man. Like, we'll see if it's successful. This one, you know, the last one was, well, the last 10 have not been a success, right? I don't see why this one is going to be successful. This situation of what's going on in Venezuela just has very much like Bolsonaro vibes, right? Or Donald Trump vibes. It's the same sort of thing where they're like, we don't accept the election result. We are paying a whole bunch of people to storm the Capitol. This time it'll be successful, not like the last time or the last time or the last time, right? Maduro's forces and Maduro's troops and Maduro himself are very prepared for this. I don't think this will be successful. It hasn't been successful for the last 40 years. I don't see why it's going to be successful now. Maybe they'll succeed in assassinating Maduro like they were successful at assassinating Chavez, right? But as Maduro has shown, the real power of the movement is the people, is the Chavistas themselves. So I think that even if they were successful in doing something like that, that there would be somebody right behind Maduro who would pick up the banner and continue it forward. I think the Chavistas are the reason why the United Socialist Party of Venezuela continues. And they are... so the empire, in my view, is getting desperate. You can see the desperation. You saw the desperation in the Democratic Republic of Congo when they tried to do a CIA-backed coup in the DRC and it failed. You can see the desperation in Israel as they assassinate Hamas negotiators. You can see the desperation in Venezuela as they backed failed coup attempt after failed coup attempt. The empire is getting desperate, and it's going, and as I have been saying for a while now, it's going to continue doing more and more desperate things. And the desperation is going to get stupider and stupider. They're going to look more and more foolish, and they're not going to know what to do. And I'm even seeing voices from within the Senate. I have a video on the Discord right now that I can't show on the stream, but it's essentially a United States senator saying, look, we tried a coup in 2019 in Venezuela. It didn't work. with Juan Guaido. We all remember Juan Guaido, right? We all remember how we all made fun of Juan Guaido and how the meme became whenever anything happened, Juan Guaido became the guy that we all ushered in, right? Like if for example, Vladimir Putin retired, right? Somebody would be like, Russia inaugurates new leader Juan Guaido, right? Like that kind of absurdist meme is what Juan Guaido became. And the senator says, we keep acting like it worked. We keep acting like it's fine. Like we keep acting like everything's normal, and we keep acting this way, and it's failed, and it's not working. And so we need to change our strategy. And the United States and the system of capital doesn't know how. Doesn't know how to change its tactics. Doesn't know how to change things. It doesn't have the humility. It doesn't have the self-awareness. It doesn't have the foresight. It doesn't have any of that. Right? Because every single time you come up with a new idea, you've got to turn to the same group of psychos, to the Koch brothers, to Elon Musk, to Jeff Bezos, to Bill Gates, to the same group, to Peter Thiel, to the same group of delusional, narcissistic psychopaths, and you have to say to them, hey, what do you think about this idea? And they're going to say no. And they're going to say no because the outcome doesn't actually matter to them. All they care about is domination and power. All they care about is themselves. They don't give a fuck about negotiating with Venezuela. Somebody like Elon Musk will literally just be like, just send another wave. Like it's like the Zap Brannigan strategy. Just send wave after wave after wave of men, and eventually it will work. Right? Like these guys are out of ideas. They have no new thoughts. They are dimwits. They are unintelligent. And these are the people that are in charge. And you see it in Venezuela, you see it in Israel, you see it in Ukraine. You see it everywhere the empire attempts to assert itself. It just fails over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, and it can't stop. It doesn't know what to do because it's out of ideas. And this is all it's ever done. And it used to work. Right? It used to work, but people have wised up. People have wised up to it. And they've been like, oh, wait a minute. Wow, you're telling me that the United States actually can attempt to overthrow every single country on the planet? Yes. Yes, they can do that, and that is what they're doing. Odra Chess over on Twitch. Hello, crazy news. Yeah, the great Machido, big friend of Millie. She must be loved by the USA, big companies who want Venezuela's oil. Yeah, you basically nail it there. Like, that's what this is all about in Venezuela. That's what the Venezuelan story is all about. Get the oil. In regards to the Israeli story, the assassination, the U.S. says it is not linked. It's not involved to the killing of Hamas chief Haniyeh, says Secretary of State Blinken. I don't know what's worse, right? I don't know what's worse. The idea that the United States is behind the killing of the Hamas chief, or the idea that the United States is not. Because on the one hand, it's just a continuation of everything we've always known, right? It's just a continuation of everything. It's just a continuation of everything we've known about the United States and the United States empire, right? It's like right in the wheelhouse for the United States. It's like when it's like when they assassinated one of the military leaders of Iran, right? They assassinated one of the military generals. When Donald Trump did it, he was just like, we got him. We did it. Right? He fully embraced it. No bullshit whatsoever. We assassinated that guy. But now the United States is sitting here being like, no, we didn't assassinate this guy. We didn't have anything to do with that. Oh, so it means that your lapdog, right? The Israel, the country that you're supposedly, in charge of, supposedly, is just outright assassinating people without your say-so or follow-through. They're just doing stuff. And then they're going to turn to you and be like, more money, please. And you're going to go, yes, Zionist master, whatever you say. Like, it's pretty fucked up. Like, it's pretty fucked up, actually. The United States is in a real lose-lose situation here. And incidentally, the idea that the United States is not somehow involved in the assassination of this leader is baby brain bullshit. Like, if they didn't directly say, go assassinate that guy, they definitely gave them the intel, gave them the weapons, gave them the money. Oh, but then they went and assassinated a guy suddenly that we unexpectedly didn't see it coming. Like, yeah, Joe says clearly Trump was attempting to trigger war with Iran. Yeah, but the Iranians are smarter than us, right? Like, that's how they've been able to withstand this period of time. That we have a very, like, quarterly basis mindset. We think that the rest of the world has a quarterly basis mindset. That as long as the line goes up quarter over quarter, everything is fine. The rest of the world doesn't view things that way. The rest of the world has things like wisdom and patience, right? We simply don't have that. Like, we just don't have any of that. And so it must be quite frustrating for the military-industrial complex, because the military-industrial complex has basically been waiting for Iran to open itself up. Right? It's just waiting for an opening to get in there and destroy it, and Iran isn't giving it to them, very straightforwardly, and Iran's been doing a really, really good job of maintaining its own integrity and maintaining itself during this period of time. I think that the people of Iran will look back on the leadership over this period of time and say good things. Even though they are a militant theocracy, right? They're militant theocrats. I think that 50, 60 years from now, people will look back and be like, if it hadn't been for those militant theocrats, the United States would have destroyed this place. Just like they destroyed Iraq. Nilo writes, apparently 2 other commanders were also assassinated, one in Gaza and the other in Lebanon. I heard on the military summary channel. And a coup was thwarted in Georgia too. They're going after Georgia again, are they? Yeah, they went after Georgia previously, right? The only reason we don't really know anything about the coup attempt that happened, like, the story that happened in Georgia, I believe it was like 2001, 2002. It was like right during 9/11. It was right during that period of time. And the reason why nobody knows about it, it's essentially the exact same story as what happened in Ukraine. That there was a protest movement that the United States co-opted in order to fund far-right neo-Nazis in order to overthrow the government, and then Putin intervened, and but it was swiftly handled, and there wasn't this huge NATO backing, and there wasn't this huge amount of media attention because the United States was busy dealing with A, 9/11, B, invading Iraq. And so nobody gave a shit about Georgia. It was just this, like, footnote in people's minds. And who gives a shit about Georgia in the first place, right? Like, nobody in America could find this place on a map. They're not even really aware of what Georgia is in the first place. They're like, what? Why, you mean the state of Georgia? Putin's invading Georgia? That would be how that would go, right? So nobody has any fucking idea. But it's the exact same situation. So I'm not surprised to see that the United States is trying again. Because, again, and I'm not surprised to see that it's being thwarted again. Because, again, the United States is out of ideas. The United States has no... The system of capital is out of ideas. It doesn't know what to do. It has no thoughts. All it knows is its religious ideology. And we're going to watch them double down, triple down, quadruple down, like over and over and over again on this religious ideology. And we're going to watch it just blow back on them over and over again. And they'll never learn their lesson because the people who are in charge are never the ones that pay the consequences for their incompetence and their foolishness. Right? It's always the people. It's always the working class. It's always us that pays the consequences for their demonic, amoral bullshit. And as long as we continue to allow them to make decisions or to have assets or to have wealth, that's what's going to continue happening. Anemone, good to see you. It's been a moment since I've seen you in the chat. Good to see you, Anemone. Hope things are well out there for you. Yeah, Long Defiant is touching down on a story that I actually have here, which is, hold on. I had it. I promise. This is going to be so good. It's going to pay out. Yeah. From the Middle East Eye. Israeli lawmaker justifies rape of Palestinian prisoners. The Israeli lawmaker from the ruling Likud party, Hanoch Milwidsky, said that everything is legitimate when asked whether it was justified to rape Palestinian prisoners. To insert a stick in a person's rectum, is that legitimate? Asked Ahmed Tibi, a Palestinian lawmaker, during a meeting. Yes. If he is a nukhba, everything is legitimate to do to him, screamed Milwidsky back. There has been widespread reporting that Palestinian prisoners are being tortured in Israeli prisons. The United Nations Agency for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA, said it received reports of mass ill treatment of Palestinians taken captive from Gaza by Israeli forces, including detainees being urinated on and made to act like animals, and children being attacked by dogs. A report released on Palestinian Prisoners' Day in April warned that for the thousands of prisoners kept in detention by the Israeli army, physical, sexual, and psychological abuse was routine. This included being subjected to beatings while made to lie on a thin mattress on top of rubble for hours without food, water, or access to a toilet, with their legs and hands bound with plastic ties. Several detainees reported being forced into cages and attacked by dogs. Some released detainees, including a child, had dog bite wounds on their body, read the report. I don't know what we need to see anymore. I don't know what we need to see anymore. Right? Zionists are Nazis. Pretty straightforward. 1 + 1 = 2, right? I graduated from kindergarten, and I think I have the ability to see that this is wrong, and that probably something should be done about it. Instead, we're just going to continue to fund it, and the only thing that people are finding is actually going to work are boycotts, right? The boycott, divest, and sanction movement, BDS, well, it's working. And how do we know it's working? Here's an article from The Intercept. Boycotts against Israel are hurting Starbucks and McDonald's sales worldwide. Both companies posted declines in global sales and profits this week, driven partially by headwinds in the Middle East. McDonald's and Starbucks have both reported declines in sales and profits. Both corporations blame boycotts by supporters of Palestine amid Israel's war in Gaza as a factor in their weak results. McDonald's yesterday reported that its global sales declined for the first time since 2020, with its net profit declining 12% compared to the same period last year. Starbucks announced Tuesday that sales in North America stores dipped 2%, and sales in the rest of the world dipped 7%. It also reported that its total international profits dropped by 23%. Although the companies point to currency fluctuation, slowdown within the Chinese market, and consumer reaction to rising menu prices to account for the change, the chief executives of both corporations cited the conflict in Gaza when discussing problems the business faced. Boycott, divestment, sanctions. A Palestinian-led movement to oppose Israel's occupation and apartheid in Palestine celebrated the dip in McDonald's earnings on their social media accounts, writing, #BDS is working. While McDonald's is not part of the group's list of targeted economic or consumer boycotts, they have endorsed it as an organic grassroots movement that started shortly after October 7th. When the chain's Israeli franchises supported the Israeli military in its incursion on Gaza. McDonald's Israel provided free meals for Israel's forces during #Gaza genocide against 2.3 million Palestinians. And the company with its dozens of branches has for decades fed apartheid's Israel's war chest, the group said, using the hashtag boycott McDonald's. During a quarterly earnings call on Monday, McDonald's CEO Chris Kempczynski said several markets continue to be negatively impacted by the war in the Middle East. The company had previously warned of low earnings in Middle Eastern countries and Southeast Asian countries such as Indonesia and Malaysia, which have Muslim majorities. On the earnings call, Kaczynski also noted that sales in France were down, and attributed that decline to the country's large Muslim population. Starbucks CEO Laxman Narasimhan also invoked the conflict in the company's quarterly call on Tuesday, indirectly pointing to boycott efforts in the same regions as McDonald's international trouble spots. Headwinds persist in the Middle East, Southeast Asia, and parts of Europe, driven by widely discussed misperceptions of our brand, said Narasimhan. Earlier this year, the company reported a significant impact on traffic and sales in the Middle East and the U.S. markets, which it also attributed to misperceptions about its brand. Shortly after October 7th, Starbucks Workers United, the union that represented more than 10,000 of the chain's employees, expressed solidarity for Palestine on its X account. In a since-deleted tweet, the union's post read, "Solidarity with Palestine," and quote-tweeted an image of a bulldozer breaking through the fence encircling Gaza. Starbucks retaliated, suing the union for damaging its reputation and misleading consumers to think the company itself supports Palestine. News of the lawsuit went viral online, along with calls to stop buying from the chain. Calls to boycott McDonald's also began days after October 7th, when the fast food giant's Israel franchise announced on social media it had donated and continues to donate tens of thousands of meals to IDF units, the police, hospitals, residents around the Strip, and all rescue forces, referring to the Israeli Defense Forces. Kaczynski defended its company amid the McDonald's boycott in a January LinkedIn post, blaming its hits to store internationally on the war and associated misinformation. Seemingly drawing distance between Israel and other markets, he noted that McDonald's international stores are owned locally, including in Muslim countries. Residents and rights groups, namely in Muslim-majority nations such as Pakistan and Kuwait, started to boycott the chain, prompting the Pakistani franchise to distance itself from the issue. In April, McDonald's was forced to buy back its 225 restaurants in Israel after the boycott tanked sales in the Middle East, according to the report. Yeah, get fucked. Get totally fucked. Just like two gigantic losers being losers and getting completely fucked. I don't know why anyone would go to McDonald's anymore. Like, I understand why people go to Starbucks, because Starbucks basically monopolized the coffee market and killed mom and pop shops everywhere it is. So it's literally Starbucks or fuck all for most of the time. But McDonald's, their food is shitty and it's expensive. I have no idea why anyone goes to McDonald's. Like, the only reason I can perceive that anybody goes to McDonald's is because they're fucking addicted to it. Because McDonald's makes their food as addicting as possible, and they're just like, I gotta get that fat and that sugar right in my face, right? Because it's disgusting food that makes you feel bad and costs as much as any other meal you can get anywhere else. I guess the only positive that exists in the McDonald's market is that when you order it, you get it 5 minutes later because they've got it sitting there warming for 2 hours, right? So it's just the shittiest meal you could possibly buy. Ugh. Yeah, kids still want to go. Yeah, marketing, right? Propaganda works, right? We got a comment here that says kids still want to go. They can't tell the food is shit. They probably can. They just like when you market to children, it works, right? Like, kids are easily persuadable. They're very gullible. Right? That's why it's so important for the capitalist death cult to ensure nobody grows up. Right? You got to make sure that everybody stays a child because children are gullible. Right? And so you market directly to children. You keep everybody in a childish mode of thinking. You make sure that nobody grows up. You make sure that nobody becomes an adult. And they'll just maintain the most gullible perspective that you've ever seen in your life, which is most of America. Right? Most Americans and Canadians are just the most gullible people you'll ever see because they're not permitted to grow up. And because it's bad for sales. It's bad why would you ever want anybody to be educated and literate? Like, that's not what capitalism wants from its citizens. But for people who actually care, for the grown-ups, the vast minority of people in the society, the grown-ups in the society who actually give a shit about this stuff, just if you find out that the people in charge of these places are at all connected to the IDF, time to fucking get out of it. Get out of there. And literally say why you're doing it. Straight up look them dead ass in the eye and be like, you support Israel? Get fucked. I hope this place goes bankrupt. Fuck you. Bye. And leave. So I hate to break it to you guys. That does mean you're going to have to all cancel your OnlyFans account. I'm sorry. It means that you're going to have to type out a letter to that OnlyFans lady that you really like. Or boy. Right? I don't judge. Right? Hey, I'm sorry. I can't support you anymore. OnlyFans is owned by a Zionist. Maybe move to a different platform. Yeah, Joe Anthony writes, they think they have a good rep? They do. Yeah, they do. Just Me writes, people pay for porn? Yeah, Just Me. People pay a lot of money for porn. The porn industry is like $1 billion industry. Right? It needs to be regulated. It's a horrible industry. And people pay a lot of money. People pay a lot of money for very stupid shit, too. Like, the people who are most popular on platforms like OnlyFans, they're most, like, the most content that they produce is, like, ASMR stuff. So they'll literally, like, talk into a microphone softly and, like, tap the microphone and, like, do stuff. And people will have headphones on and they'll listen and it'll be like an audible experience. And that's what they do most of the time. Right? Just like a scantily clad woman basically being like, how was your day today? Is everything fine for you? I hope everything's going super well in your life. You do so good. You're so good. And that's it. That's the whole shtick. People pay for it. Like, one of the biggest people on OnlyFans makes like $100 million a year doing that. Because capitalism allocates resources in the most rational way. Right? That's just how capitalism works, baby. That there's a demand, and she is obviously filling that demand, and it makes all the sense in the world that a person like that would have $100 million while there are homeless people on the streets. It just makes sense. Right? It's just rational, that's just logical. And if you think otherwise, then you're just a kooky communist, I guess. Long Defiant writes, I broke my sugar addiction this year, and if you don't think you're addicted, think again. Oh yeah, sugar's in everything. I tried to go like sugar-free. I've got it down now to just like, I put some sugar in my coffee, and that's it. That's the only sugar that I actually eat anymore. Although it's amazing how often you'll like look at a product and be like, second ingredient sugar. It's just amazing how often that happens. Oh, Donald, gracing us again with your presence, I see. Yeah, Odra Chest writes, McDonald's is totally shit. It was understandable when it was cheap some years ago. Now it's very expensive and it's very shitty quality. Yeah. And in Italy, we're full of McDonald's. If a Chinese restaurant opens, because of all the anti-Chinese propaganda we grew up with, nobody would go there. Instead, they'll go to American big chains. Yeah, people love to pay huge amounts of money for a shitty product, right? They love it. They like, and that's McDonald's to a T. It's not even good. Yeah, Donald, we know you love eating McDonald's. We can tell. And of course, proving that Kamala Harris is meaningfully different than the Republicans. Israel has the right to defend itself, says Kamala Harris, following Israeli airstrike on Lebanon. The reason why Kamala Harris needs to lose to Donald Trump, the reason why Donald Trump needs to win the next election is because if Kamala Harris wins the election, it is fundamentally saying, it is America and Americans saying, genocide is go. Genocide is fine. That there is no limit. There's no bottom. That we just don't want our shitty actions and our shitty behavior to affect us. And so as long as the person who's in charge is, some Oprah-style smiling sycophant, then genocides are completely fine. Kamala Harris should lose. I hope she loses badly so that America can have a moment of looking itself dead ass in the face and being like, oh shit, this is actually who we are. We are actually like crass, boorish, despicable, disgusting, genocidal monsters. That's who we are. Oh. Donald writes, do you think Kamala Harris is a Nazi? I don't think that she's a Nazi. I mean, she's a Zionist. So, yes, I guess. Like, it's just as bad. If you are enacting a genocide, like, the big difference is that I think someone like Kamala Harris, like, she's not the one doing the speeches, right? She's not the one pulling the trigger. You know what I mean? She's I guess the shortest answer would be she's not a Nazi. She's just as bad. She's a liberal, right? She works really hard to convince you that she's good when she's just in the same room with the same people. Like she might not be a Nazi herself, but she's fine making deals and organizing with Nazis, right? Because she's the good cop. That's the way this works. Right, that's the way this works. Is that you need a good cop. You need a good cop to go against the bad cop. And look how energized the liberal people, like liberals, are in America. Like, look how energized Jimmy Fallon has gotten. Look how energized Stephen Colbert has gotten. Look how energized Jon Stewart has gotten. Look how energized John Oliver has gotten. Look how energized they've all gotten about the idea that, oh boy, oh goody, now it's Kamala, right? Because Americans and liberals, like Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert and John Oliver and all these guys, they don't care about the genocide. They don't care about foreign policy. They don't care about what America is actually doing. Right? What they care about is that they are represented by somebody who can form a sentence. Right? Like really think about how ridiculous this looks like from the outside. Is that they're all losing their minds and salivating because Kamala Harris sounds coherent. Like, that's where the bar has gotten. That Kamala Harris can say a sentence and sound coherent. Goody. Good for you, bud. Super glad. Yeah, Long Defiant writes, social democracy is the left wing of fascism. Yeah. Nilo writes, she's clearly a white supremacist working with Biden. I mean, she's a prosecutor who keeps innocent people in prison and then laughs about it. Like, yeah, she's obviously like an Uncle Tom style figure, for sure. Stalin 69, good to see you. Nice news about Starbucks. Yeah, glad to hear it. Donald writes, she gives a very sweet speech, always smiling. Yeah, charisma counts as a leader, and she promised to stand for minorities and colored people in the United States. Right. So she's like every politician. Like, literally every politician will stand up in front of you with a big smile on their face and be like, even Donald Trump will say that he's fighting for minorities and colored people in the United States. Like, come on. Like, this is what we're here to do. We're here to disseminate between what is real and what is false. And your starting point, the place that you should begin, is these people are full of shit. You should start from the position that Kamala Harris is a narcissistic psychopath. And how do you know that she's got to be a narcissistic psychopath? Because she's the vice president of the United States of America. There's a 0% chance that she has ascended to this status in a country as bloodthirsty, blood-drenched, genocidal, narcissistic, and psychopathic as the United States. There's a 0% chance that she has ascended to the top of this chain without herself being a narcissistic psychopath. It's like a 0% chance. The system vets people out who are not psychopathic narcissists. You have to be a narcissistic psychopath. Donald writes, "You seem quite radical." The name of the show is Capitalism is a Death Cult. My moniker is the Canadian Commie. Communists believe in the overthrowing of capitalist systems, the clearing away of the system as it stands. Yeah, Nilo's nailing it. You seem quite unserious, unconcerned. Like that. This is sort of my question for you, Donald. Why are you here? Like, what is it that you're doing here? Right? Like, what's up? Like, is this just entertainment for you? Are you just so detached from reality that this is just a curiosity for you? Is that all this is? Because for lots of people in my chat and around the world, this isn't entertainment. And Joe writes, radical is not synonymous with bad. Yeah. I mean, it is if you've just bought into the system of capital, right? It is if you just bought in. Long Defiant writes, it's setting bait so it can feel like a master when you take the bait. But it's just ridiculous. Like, I'm here to explain the decline of Western civilization. That's the whole point of this show. And if somebody is going to, I guess, set bait, okay, then that's what we'll do. That's fine. Like, it's just like, I don't mind having people like this around because it shows everybody what we're up against. It reminds everybody that capitalism is a death cult, which is the name of the show, right? And that the people who believe in capitalism are death cultists, right? That they believe in the destruction of human civilization and the glorification of money. That's what they believe in, and they don't believe in anything else. They have no principles outside of that. And so when these people are around and act the way that they do, they just reaffirm everything that we understand. And I don't immediately want to leap to ban them, because I think it's important that people see the depravity of the capitalist mind. That they see it, that they witness it, that they're constantly shook out of their bubble. Right? I'll protect the chat and I'll protect people from Nazis. Right? People who come in and deny the Palestinian genocide. People who come in and talk about how the Jews are the problem. Right? People who come in and try to talk about how Carl Schmitt is a good person that we should listen to. Right? I'll protect us from Nazis and Zionists and MAGA communists and all the far right Nazi kooks that exist out in the world. Sure. But if a person is going to just be a capitalist and just constantly reveal to all of us the incompetence, stupidity, inability of the religious mind to grapple with reality, I'm happy to have that person in the chat. Because I think it's important for us to see exactly how dim-witted and exactly how pathetic and exactly how ridiculous the leaders of the free world actually are. That someone like Donald is the president of the United States. You understand? Like, that someone like Donald is exactly as intelligent as Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. And it's important for us to connect those dots and realize exactly how ridiculous the situation has become, and exactly how depraved we are, and exactly how absurd we are, and exactly how stupid we've become. Because the entire rest of the world sees us this way. China, India, Latin America, Africa, Russia. They're all looking at us and going, oh, fuck. These guys are absolutely demented. Demented on a level that you gotta go back to, like, ancient Rome and see, like, the people crucifying people in order to attain that same level of just detached psychopathic narcissism. And the rest of the world is doing everything they can to just completely isolate the West. Because we've got the majority position is Donald. So I don't mind. You keep commenting, Donald. You keep revealing how foolish you are and how foolish the system of capitalism is. You keep going on with that. Keep, quote-unquote, setting your bait. And I mean, a real case in point of what I'm talking about how pathetic capitalists are and the capitalist mindset. So, Radio Canada commentators, right, refused to describe a volleyball match during the Olympics, they're going on right now, of an athlete convicted of rape. Okay? On the surface, a good story. People are like, well, wait a minute. This guy raped somebody when he was 19, and now he's an athlete? I'm not going to comment on his match. I'm not going to do that. This guy shouldn't even be here. Forget this guy. So, what's this guy's name? Did not comment on the between Netherlands and Chile, one of the Dutch players. We refuse to comment on the Dutch players today because of the nefarious past of one of the players on the Dutch team, having raped a young girl when he was younger. Now coming onto the court, the Israeli team. So it's all performative, right? It's performative morality, right? When there's no stakes and there's no consequences, and everybody is going to be like, yeah, then fine. But the moment the Israeli team comes on, oh, the Israelis look good today, don't they? Oh, they look really good today with their this person's been training for years. The reason why I don't watch the Olympics and the reason why I think everybody should stop watching the Olympics is because there's a single Israeli athlete there. That the Israelis should have been given a resounding no. They should have been told very plainly, you are not permitted to be here. And the fact that they are permitted to be there, nope. No participation from me. Not interested. No engagement. 0 eyes. I don't care who wins what. 0% of anything. Maybe at the very, 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 very end, I'll be like, here's the medal tally. Brad writes, what? Just because of the war crimes? Yeah. Yeah, Brad. Yeah, the war crimes. You know, the genocide, the flagrant disregard for international law, the fact that the ICJ is telling them to stop and they don't care, the fact that the UN is telling them to stop and they don't care, the fact that there's going to be arrest warrants sent out and of course they're not going to care, you know, the fact that they're obviously Nazis, you know, very obviously and straightforwardly in like a 1+1, like really you gotta be a baby. Like anyone younger than maybe 3, I could be like, oh, okay, I see why you don't think these people are Nazis. But everybody else should be able to be like, yep, that's a fucking Nazi, all right. Abso-fucking-lutely. So the fact that we're getting stories about how, oh, this Dutch player did something nefarious in his past, while just openly being fine about literal Nazis in front of you. It's just hypocrisy at the highest possible level. This is what liberalism is all about, in my view. This is 100% who liberals are and what liberalism is and how liberalism operates. That if you're a liberal, this is exactly the type of person you are. Oh, the Dutch. Oh, I didn't care about that player. Did you see the Israeli player? She was so good. In positive news, right? You got to go outside the West to find the positive news these days. From ABC News, India and China agree to work urgently to achieve the withdrawal of troops on their disputed border. India says it has agreed with China to work urgently to achieve the withdrawal of tens of thousands of troops stationed along their disputed border in a long-running standoff. India and China have agreed to work urgently to achieve the withdrawal of tens of thousands of troops stationed along their disputed border in a long-running standoff, India's government has said. Indian Foreign Minister Subrahmanyam Jaishankar met his Chinese counterpart, Wang Yi, on Thursday on the sidelines of Association of Southeast Asian Nation meetings in Laos, where they stressed the need for an early resolution of outstanding issues along the disputed line of actual control, the long Himalayan border shared by the two Asian giants. The line separates Chinese and Indian-held territories from Ladakh in the west to India's western state of Arunachal Pradesh, which China claims in its entirety. Ties between the two countries deteriorated in July 2020 after a military clash killed at least 20 Indian soldiers and 4 Chinese. It turned into a long-running standoff in the rugged mountainous area, where each side has stationed tens of thousands of military personnel, backed by artillery, tanks, and fighter jets. Both India and China have withdrawn troops from some areas on the northern and southern banks of Pangyong Tso, Gorga, and Galwan Valley, but continue to maintain extra troops as part of a multi-tier deployment. The two foreign ministers agreed on the need to work with purpose and urgency to achieve complete disengagement at the earliest, according to an Indian statement late Thursday, which added that peace on the border is essential for restoring normalcy and ties between the two countries. Jaishankar, in his opening remarks, said the border issues have cast a shadow over India-China ties for the last 4 years, despite considerable efforts by both sides to solve them. The state of the border will necessarily be reflected on the state of our ties, he said, according to the statement. Wang stressed that improving China-India ties is beneficial for both countries, as well as for other nations. China's official Xinhua news agency reported. The two sides agreed to work together to maintain peace in border areas and push for progress, it said. India and China fought a war over their border in 1962. The line of actual control divides the areas of physical control rather than territorial claims. According to India, the de facto border is 3,488 kilometers, but China claims a considerably shorter figure. Top Indian and Chinese army commanders have held several rounds of talks since the military clash to discuss the disengagement of troops from areas of tension. I think that this is really positive news. I think this is really good to hear. It's really nice to see countries that are actually trying to resolve disputes. This is actually also extremely important for the future of Chinese and Indian relations, because not only have these relations been strained due to this kind of military clash, it's been strained because of China's sudden rise. That India, rightly, is concerned that China's sudden rise is going to result in military conflict and clashes, that China is going to become imperialist the way that America is imperialist. That is the concern, and even an accusation that even Western Marxists will levy against the Chinese, having, not done any research on China and not knowing anything about China in the first place. China, of course, is primarily interested in trade and creating trade negotiations and trade deals. And so a border dispute such as this one gets in the way of that. reminding everybody that India is one of the key players in the BRICS organization. Without India, they don't have any vowels, right? Then it's just BRICS. That sounds terrible. So it's got to be BRICS. Of course, China has really shown and really is interested in helping developing countries develop. That they view helping developing countries develop as a way to also enrich China further. That places in Africa and India have access to resources that China doesn't have access to. And the reason why the Indians or the Africans are not able to take advantage of the resources is because of the period of imperialism followed by a period of bourgeois leadership. And so China is going in there, trying to create deals, trying to move things forward, trying to help these countries build back from this imperialist period. And India is one of those nations. Like, India used to be a major economic power in the world. That India had industrialized itself well before the industrial period in Europe took hold. That there is a period of time that I think we should call the period of naivety. That everybody in the world, like, nobody in the world believed anybody would act the way the Europeans acted. Nobody believed that the European nations would act as ruthlessly and insanely as they did. And I think that this actually carries through even close to the modern period. That the entire rest of the world keeps looking at the West, thinking to itself, well, clearly they're going to act rationally, right? Clearly they're not going to just do a bunch of insane bullshit, commit huge, massive genocides, steal enormous amounts of resources, and then proclaim themselves God kings, right? They're certainly not going to do that. That's exactly what they're going to do. That's exactly what they're going to do. And the reason why there is this naivety that exists, that you can see over and over and over again, that communists just are naive, that they think that because they are rational, that other people will think rationally as well. And it's because there has been no serious work done and no serious acceptance of the reality that capitalism is a religious ideology first. That there's been a lot of work done, and you can read Marx to see it, on the scientific existence of how capitalism operates, right? That the relationship between the worker and the worker and the owner, the relationship between the bourgeois and the proletariat, the labor theory of value, the concepts that exist within Marxism are scientific concepts, and it's a scientific investigation of how the system of capitalism actually works. But it is bereft of an analysis of what the defenders of capitalism actually believe. Have a good one, Cotton. Always good to see you, my man. And that religious ideology, what do capitalists actually believe? What do they actually think? How do they actually think reality works? And that religious ideology can be surmised, if I was to summarize it in the nicest way possible, and they'll tell you this is the case, is that the world works by individuals pursuing their own interests in a free market system. That's the religious ideology of capitalism. Or if I was to phrase that in a way that makes more sense and isn't so nice, selfish, greedy narcissists burn down the planet for money in a lawless society that worships chaos. Which is actually what they believe. Because they're chaos death knights pursuing the destruction of the civilization, the society, a sustainable ecosystem in pursuit of money they themselves are responsible for printing. That's the true insanity of capitalism. That the capitalists themselves are responsible for printing the money that they're all competing to get, and they're willing to destroy all assets that have any value at all in order to get it. It's a mental illness. It's depraved. It's a religious death cult. And more people should take it seriously. Like if the leadership of China and Russia and India and the leaders of Africa and Latin America were looking and actually saying to themselves seriously, oh, this is a religious death cult, they would be operating on on many different principles than they are now. Yeah, Ayn Rand, yeah, objectivism, right? Ayn Rand encapsulates that idea very cleanly, but libertarians believe it too, right? It's the same packaged nonsense over and over and over again, right? You take the same ideas and you repackage it over and over and over again, which is, how can I murder as many people for money and get away with it, right? It's just a group of psychopaths attempting to find language in order to justify their psychopathy to everybody, over and over and over and over again, and they do it over and over and over and over again. And Ayn Rand was one of them, who attempted to justify her psychopathy to the rest of the world, when at the end of the day, like, they worship money, which is already on its face the stupidest thing for a person to do. Like, you're worshiping money? Money. The thing that banks make. That's what you worship. And then they worship themselves. They believe that they have the position of a god, and that everybody else is just an NPC. And then fundamentally, they worship chaos. DM writes, good evening, John. Do you believe the new Indo-Sino agreement will push the much-needed Belt and Road Initiative project between the two industrial nations? Long live Maduro, may he prosper and win. I mean, yeah, that's the point. Like, that's the goal. China is heavily invested and heavily interested in increasing ties with India. It does not want India to join forces with Japan or other regional actors in order to do a containment strategy on behalf of the United States empire against China, right? China does not want to be contained. It doesn't want to experience a containment strategy. India could play a very important role for the empire by helping to contain China. And so China is doing everything it can to convince India that not only is China not interested in hurting India, which is the fear, it is actually interested in helping India. That China continuously talks about win-win diplomacy, where both sides actually walk away from the negotiating table with a victory, that they can turn back to their own people and say, look, we got this from the Indians, and the thing that we have to give them is something that we wanted to give them in the first place. And that the Indians can turn around and say the same to the Chinese. And so you end up with win-win diplomacy. And this idea is what China wants to move forward. This military dispute was one of the things that was standing between India and China coming to terms with that. Although India and China's relationship in BRICS shows you that the Indians are more interested in moving forward with the Chinese than they are with moving forward with the West. And I think it is in India's best interest to do so, The concern that the ruling class of India has, of course, is that they don't want their own citizens getting any ideas. They don't want their citizens getting the idea that we should have a revolution, overthrow these bourgeois losers. The workers should seize control of the state, and we should erect a workers' council or something, right? So internally, there's a lot of tiptoeing that needs to happen. I think that if the ruling class of India actually delivers to its people, like this would be the thing that would be a real problem for India and for the BRICS arrangement entirely, is if China started to invest and do business in India and started to increase its prosperity and increase its wealth, but all that wealth just coalesced at the top like it has in America, right? If the Indian bourgeois basically just kept the wealth for themselves, like the American bourgeois has kept its wealth for itself, I think that you would experience a revolution very quickly in India. And so a lot is going to ride on whether or not the Indian bourgeois is capable of being intelligent, right? Because this is how you know the capitalist bourgeois in America are the dumbest people you've ever seen in your life, like literally dirt stupid morons. That anybody with any sense in their head at all, like just like literally, can you do mathematics? Like, do you know what 1 + 1 is? Would go, oh, there's a lot of disruption happening in my society. I have $100 billion. Maybe I should give some of that money away. Maybe I should go to some of these places that are in crisis, that are experiencing crisis, and I should give that money away. Maybe I should talk to the governor of my state. Like, forget about the president of the United States, right? Maybe I should go to the governor of my state, and we should have a serious conversation about what I can do in order to help alleviate a lot of these tensions and a lot of these crises, because I have a lot of resources, right? So anyone with any sense in their head would say exactly this. Instead, we end up with the dumbest people you've ever met in your life cosplaying as intelligent people, like Elon Musk, right? Or Bill Gates, right? These guys are the dumbest people you've ever met. Maybe they know how to do calculus really well, but when it comes to actually having any kind of humanity, any kind of sense on a basic human level, they're clearly idiots, right? Very, very obviously. And so if the Indian bourgeois can avoid that kind of moronic behavior that we see in our own bourgeois, then they could stay in power for a long time, right? This is, if you want to see the group of people who is doing what I'm talking about, right, you want to take a look at the Saudi princes. The Saudi princes are Machiavellian evil geniuses. They know how to govern. They've been governing for a while. And one of the major precepts of how to stay in power, if you are a Machiavellian genius, is you cannot hoard all the wealth for yourself, boys. You can't hoard. And Joe Anthony writes, where's the sense of decency? It's not even about decency, right? If you want to be the king, and you want your son to be the king, and you want your son's son to be the king, then you need to have goodwill. You need to have goodwill in the populace. You need the people to think positively of you. You at least need the bread and the circuses. You at least need people to be placated. You at least need people to think to themselves, oh yeah, I've got enough to eat and I can have a family and I can work. And sure, it's difficult, but life's difficult and you work hard and you can raise a family and we live together and everything's fine and we all come together and all of that kind of stuff. And that's what's called a social contract. Right? You need to uphold a social contract. Brad writes over on Twitch, that or complete control, including of information, that is not actually possible to do. This sort of George Orwellian idea, that sort of thought, it's not actually possible. You can have big, large control systems. The United States, I think, is case in point for this, but they can't last. They're not sustainable, right? That at some point you need to actually do something about reality. The case in point, the Iraq War, right? Everybody knows the Iraq War was fraudulent. Everybody knows the Iraq War was a lie, right? Nobody is sitting around talking about how the Iraq War was just or right. Nobody defends the Iraq War. And that's because you can't have total control. And the CIA and the FBI, the State Department, like, these are major, like, multi-billion-dollar organizations that are specifically designed to have as much control in the populace as possible. And even they can't really maintain control. They lose control of the situation all the time. Brad writes, North Korea, though? My man. Like, I think that this really is a case of, like, I don't actually think you know anything about North Korea. Like, all the news you've ever seen about North Korea has basically just come from the CIA. You know what I mean? Like, when you talk about control, you should be talking about the CIA. You should be talking about the FBI. You shouldn't really be interested in North Korea for this reason. Like, North Korea is doing pretty well for itself, all things considered. Right? When you actually look at the history of North Korea and you actually look at what happened to them and you actually look at where they've gone and where they're going, looks to me like they've done okay. Right? That North Korea in 1950 was leveled to the ground by the United States. The United States invaded Korea, split the country in two, fractured it politically, took South Korea over, what we call South Korea, but what the North Koreans would call the occupied territories of Korea, and and murdered 20% of the population of North Korea, destroyed 80% of their infrastructure, including churches, including libraries, including dams, including government buildings, threatened to drop nuclear bombs on them. And by about 1955, the Americans decided that they'd had enough blowing up, wood huts in the country. And so they moved to Vietnam and started destroying Vietnam and Laos and Cambodia, right? In the exact same manner. Just like an aerial holocaust, right? Just... The policy being anything that flies against anything that moves. Just a total genocide enacted by the United States military during that period of time. There's a ton of war movies that are made about the Vietnam War, and that extends to Korea as well, right? Although Korea is called the Forgotten War because we don't actually discuss it, because it's like overtly genocidal. It's just bloodthirsty at the highest possible level. Like, we don't want America, or we don't want China to take Korea for itself, so we're going to destroy it to, quote-unquote, staunch the spread of communism. And they did that to Korea, they did that to Vietnam, they did that to Laos, they did that to Cambodia. Peace was never declared between the North and the South. That North Korea and South Korea are technically still in a state of war, that they declared a ceasefire with one another. And there was discussions about reunification. And those, I think, were actually taken seriously for a little period of time. But now I think that that's over. I think that the North no longer sees that reunification is possible with the South. Mainly because the South has become just a complete surrogate of the system of capital and has gone on completely off the rails. South Korea is like the number one has the number one suicide rate in the world, I believe. I think there's only one place that's higher than them. They also have a birth rate of like 0.3. So North Korea is taking a look at South Korea and is thinking to themselves, and meanwhile South Korea is like talking all this shit about North Korea. And so South Korea is just looking at North Korea is just looking at South Korea, and they're just going, in 50 years, you guys are going to be gone. You have a birth rate of 0.3. You're not, like, your old people will die off and no one will be left in South Korea. Most of you are committing suicide. So in 50, 60 years, we're just going to walk down there. Anemone points out they also did it to Bangladesh. Yeah, thank you, Anemone. And so and so after this genocide was perpetuated against the North Korean people, they were basically just left to their own devices, and they rebuilt their country, right? And if you go and take a look at North Korea now, I think it's done very, very well for itself, considering the sanctions that it's experienced, its inability to get access to the world market, its inability to get access to goods. It's been fortunate that it's had a decent trading partner in China for this whole time. And China has treated it decently during this period of time. I think the only reason North Korea exists as an entity at all is because of the Chinese. And and all of the information that we receive about North Korea, it comes directly from the CIA, and I don't see a single reason for us to believe anything that the CIA has to say on any subject, right? That the only time I will source the CIA is when they finally confess something that we've always known is true, that they've been lying about, right? So, for example, I'll source CIA documents when they talk about how the gulags were actually pretty fine, comparatively. Like, I'll use the CIA when they finally confess that the Soviet Union wasn't actually a dictatorship, right? So when the CIA finally releases documents to contravene the lies that they perpetuate into the society, I'll happily source them. But outside of that, no interest at all. So one of the things you want to do, Brad, and Brad, I'll be really honest with you, bud. I don't get upset with people who kind of fall for the North Korea narrative, because it's so pernicious. We don't hear anything else. It's not like there's a big, long, strong counter narrative. You know what I mean? It's not like there's anybody reporting from North Korea. You know what I mean? So all we get is this one line, and all we get is this one thing. And so I highly advise you, anytime you read anything about North Korea, sift through the article, okay? Well, read the article. And if they reference organizations like the National Endowment for Democracy, anything Radio Free Europe, Radio Free Asia, any of this kind of stuff, these are CIA outlets. And as soon as you see anything that is tainted by the CIA, you should immediately just go, oh, it's a lie. It's just bullshit. And you should also be aware that what the CIA will do, so you can see this with somebody like Yeonmi Park, for example, right, who's just a flagrant, fraudulent liar. What the CIA will do is they offer like $100,000 to defectors. So if you defect from North Korea and come into the South, the CIA will give you a narrative. They will hand you, the defector, a piece of paper that has quote-unquote information on it, and they will tell you a narrative about North Korea, and then they'll hand you $100,000 and say, repeat this. And most people say, okay, right? So they don't care if it's a lie. And we have like lots of these defectors on record being like, oh, the CIA told me my country was doing this and I had no idea. Yeah, of course you had no idea, because it's not happening, because it's just a flagrant lie. So when you're talking about systems of control, when you're talking about propaganda, when you're talking about nations that are in this thrall of control, you are talking about the United States. There isn't a country that comes remotely close to the propaganda that the United States and Westerners experience. Not even remotely close. And the entire purpose of my show, the entire purpose, why I do what I do, every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Eastern Standard Time, 6 to 9 p.m. Come on down, like, share, subscribe, donate to the Patreon. The reason why I do it is to give you a counter narrative, to be able to show you very plainly that there is propaganda in our society. And that we should break it apart and we shouldn't trust the people disseminating it. Woke CIA drone pilot, are you causing problems in the chat? I don't actually care if there is somebody who was at one point a mega communist or a mega communist type in the chat, as long as they're not stirring up trouble, because I think that it is completely possible for a person to have gotten in with the kind of has infrared crowd, the people who are in the MAGA communist side of things, to and are coming out of that and trying to find other commentators who don't necessarily align with that worldview. So I don't mind if that pipeline exists, because I think that there are people in the world who have come to see that something like communism or socialism are good ideas, and they've searched around, and who have they found? Right? They have found people like Haz or Jackson Hinkle, right? That's who they've found. And they haven't found anybody else. And so they spend some time with them, and they listen to them, and they think, oh yeah, okay, there's some sense here, and this is fine, and all this kind of stuff. But I don't think that they can defend it, right? Like, I think that the worldview of the MAGA communists is not defensible. But I understand why somebody would join them for a minute. And so if they're going to be like that and then come here and spend some time in here and learn about communism and get away from the fact that these guys are sourcing people like Carl Schmitt, talking about how great Nazis are, and how we should all be little Nazis, then that's fine by me. I got no problem with that. So we don't need to stir up any trouble at all. The trouble comes if these guys start saying, have you read the works of Carl Schmitt? What we got to do is take a look at the theory of the partisan as espoused by radical Nazi Carl Schmitt, and listen to his grand words as he discusses the partisan. Which is what the mega communists do. Never forget, brother. Never forget, brother. Never forget, brother. Yeah, definitely. I'm one of them. I found Canadian Commie. I was mega. Oh, really? Well, I'm glad. You know what? That's how it goes, buddy. Like, that's how it goes. And I don't hold this shit against anybody. The only people I'm gonna go after are the people who like come in here and actually try to defend guys like Haz, who like. My position on many of these MAGA communists, like Eddie Liger is the big one, right? Midwestern Marx. Like, I definitely see this guy as like 95% of the time when I see the content that he's putting out, I'm like, fuck yeah, you are right on the money, bud. You're absolutely right. When he's talking about communism and when he's talking about foreign policy and when he's talking about these kinds of stuff, but he's obviously a young white man living in a young white man's environment, surrounded by other young white men. And he hasn't taken the time to deconstruct that. He hasn't taken the time to actually say to himself, like, oh, like, I live in... He hasn't taken the work that he's done with his material historical analysis as from scientific socialism. He hasn't taken that tool and turned it on himself. And the position of the MAGA communists is that they shouldn't have to. Which makes the rest of us go, tough shit. Tough shit. Too bad. And so what you end up with is a young man who wishes that he didn't have to do a deconstruction of himself. And you end up with a group of young men that say, why do we white straight men need to deconstruct ourselves? Why do we actually need to deconstruct ourselves? And the reason why you have to deconstruct yourself is because you've got to break out of the pattern that exists in your mind as a straight white man, that straight white man is a default. Because that's what they obviously believe. They obviously believe that straight white man is a default position. That's the universal. That's what the state represents. That when the state projects itself outwards, it projects the image of a straight white man. Play nice, guys. I got no problem banning people who are rude. You don't need to be rude to me. You can be rude to other people in the chat, and I will definitely just ban you. I got no problem with that at all. So that's my big concern about the MAGA communists, and mainly that, like, you simply cannot say we should ignore the issues of LGBTQ women, right, minorities. That we should just ignore these issues and focus on the universal issue of workers' rights. Because really, fundamentally, what they're saying is we should focus on the only issue that matters to me. Right? And the only issue that matters to a straight white male is how much money I'm making. And sure, you can say, aren't you also concerned about that as a woman, as somebody who is LGBTQ, as somebody who is a minority? Aren't you also concerned about that? Sure, you can say that. But if your position is we should ignore the other issues that they're putting forward, you're just not going to win. You're just not going to be able to actually organize. And if your idea is to push those groups aside and reach across the aisle to fascists, well, then don't be too shocked when the fascists take over and betray you. That's it. That's it. So somebody in the Twitch chat a while back asked, would I rather live in Canada or the USSR? I would rather live in a country. Would you rather live in the Soviet Union or Canada? Sort of depends. Sort of depends on what the. Sort of depends on the moment, right? I definitely wouldn't want to live in the Soviet Union while the Nazis were invading it, right? But I think living in the Soviet Union would be a very exciting period of time. It'd be very exciting to be part of a country that was actually attempting to solve its own problems, right? I've said over and over and over again, I would much rather live in a country that was attempting to solve its own problems and failing than living in a country that refused to deal with its problems at all. Stumps, who I believe was the person who asked that first question, how would you know if a straight white male's only problem is how much money they make? Well, I mean, that's a short, I'm being somewhat flippant, I acknowledge that. That the issue of the straight white male is usually just workers' rights, which is usually just like, I want my workplace to give me more money or benefits or any of that kind of stuff. There is also the issue for men that has come up, that men are struggling to find partners in this environment. There's the issue of loneliness that has definitely come up, that is affecting not just men, but also women as well. I think that's a capitalist issue. I think that's also a workers' rights issue, because the system of capital is no longer delivering on any of its promises. It lacks the stability to actually allow people to couple up and find relationships and have children. And you can see how that's being reflected in the birth rate across the entire capitalist world. That the birth rate has dropped precipitously across the capitalist world, going as low as 0.3. But most capitalist countries have a birth rate of like 1.4, which is a major crisis. Like, to me, I take a look at what the major crises the system of capital is experiencing. And climate change is obviously very high on the list. But the collapsing birth rate is an enormous problem for capital. Just an absolutely enormous problem that they can't solve. They don't actually have a solution for it. And in 50, 60 years' time, like, we're going to be looking at a collapsing demographic. By then the boomers will be gone, right? The millennials will be the eldest, and so it'll be this cohort. The millennials will be the largest cohort. Gen Z was actually a pretty stable. Like, so from millennial to Gen Z, it was actually pretty stable. But then from Gen Z to Gen Alpha is half the size of the millennials in terms of a cohort. So it's like this. It's just a total inversion. And that's a downward spiral. That's a downward line in a precipitous way. And if you take a look at a place like South Korea, for example, South Korea is absolutely in a major, like, red alert, like, flashing red light crisis. They have a birth rate of 0.3. That means that for every 100 people, there will only be a replacement of 30. Right? So if you have a population of, make sure I get this math correct, if you have a population of 1 million, the next generation will be a population of 300,000. That is like, you got to look at like plagues to experience that kind of devastation, and even then, right? Like, you're looking at like some of the worst events that humans have ever experienced, and we have not seen a population decline like that, right? Like, what evidence do you need to see that the system of capital is a complete and total catastrophic failure? Then it's eaten itself. That it's literally eating generations. It's literally eating entire populaces to death. Just straight up, like, as the generations go down, and as the birth rate stays like this. So if you've got a birth rate of 0.3, then that means that if you have a population of 1 million, the next generation will be 30,000 or 300,000, right? Well, the next generation after that will be something like 60,000, right? And then if that persists, then the next generation after that will be something like 10,000. So it's just like this precipitous downward line of just... Joe writes, lower birth rates makes it harder for them to speculate on their BS stock market futures. Yeah. Because the line is what matters. Joe writes, no one is bashing the country. We're bashing the antiquated economic system most of us must function within in order to starve and or be homeless. Yep. Yeah. Fiddleford would write, so Soviet citizens would report having more of an issue with the bureaucracies in Canada than the bureaucracies in the USSR. Yeah, I mean, like, it pays to remember that most of the information that we get about communist nations comes from the American state. Like, the American state that's literally saying we need to destroy communism. So, I just don't think that we can get valuable information about the USSR or China or Cuba or North Korea or Venezuela from a country that's actively attempting to destroy them. You know, I just don't think that's a serious position to hold. So, moving on to fun, amazing news that's definitely not going to result in some crazy sci-fi dystopian bullshit. Scientists mind-controlled mice remotely, an extraordinary world first. It's a shame Content isn't here to see this one. At the mere flick of a magnetic field, mice engineered with nanoparticle-activated switches inside their brains were driven to feed, socialize, and act like clucky new mothers in an experiment designed to test an innovative research tool. So here's your capitalist innovation right here. While mind control animal experiments are far from new, they have generally relied on cumbersome electrodes tethered to the subject to an external system, which not only requires invasive surgery, but also sets limits on how freely the test subject can move about. In what is claimed to be a breakthrough in neurology, researchers from the Institute for Basic Science in Korea have developed a method for targeting pathways in the brain using a combination of genetics, nanoparticles, and magnetic fields. If this sounds like eugenics, they call the technology nanomind, an acronym for magnetogenetic interface for neurodynamics. And while mind control is a coarse but relatively accurate way of describing it, the system in its current form is intended to provide researchers with a means of remotely activating neural circuits for a range of research applications. This is the world's first technology to freely control specific brain region using magnetic fields, says Jinwoo Xian, senior author and director of the IBS Center for Nanomedicine. We expect it to be widely used in research to understand brain functions, sophisticated artificial neural networks, two-way BCI technologies, that's brain-computer interface technologies, and new treatments for neurological disorders, right? It's always justified by being like, we can help people with diseases. We're certainly not going to sell this to the CIA so that they can mind control entire populaces into accepting their subjugation. That's definitely not going to happen. We're definitely not going to release these magnetic fields and make people love their owners. That's definitely not going to happen. Magnetic stimulation is an emerging field of research in neurology, where washing the brain with pulses of electromagnetism broadly massages whole regions into subtly changing their behavior. To target specific circuits, the researchers took a leaf out of another field of research called optogenetics, which genetically engineers mechanisms into cells that can be readily activated by a light source. Just say it's eugenics. Just call it eugenics, baby. In this case, the team integrated ion channels into targeted populations of brain cells in mice. Instead of delivering light through a localized fiber, as in optogenetics, the ion channels could be switched on magnetically with a twist of a tiny actuator. All that's required is a surrounding field that's strong enough to pull at the nanoparticle. To put this setup through its paces, the researchers designed 3 different tests. The first concerned receptors involved in complex feeding and reward behaviors within the lateral hypothalamus, a region located deep inside the very core of the brain. Monitoring the animal's movements and food intake within and outside of a magnetic field revealed significant differences that showed it was possible to literally switch the mouse's desire to eat on and off at will. Under the influence of the magnetic field, a group of mice with switches on their excitatory neurons ate only half as much food. A second group with engineered inhibitory neurons ate twice as much, while the magnetic field was active. The lateral hypothalamus also contains pathways responsible for sociability. Placing a suitably engineered mouse into a chamber containing a mouse they'd never met before, while the magnetic fields were active, showed friendly forms of behavior could be encouraged in the mice. Another test targeted key receptors in what's known as the medical preoptic area, which is implicated in parental care. Female mice with nanomind stimulating the medical preoptic area placed into a chamber enriched with naturalistic features responded very differently to the cries of baby mice, approaching them more quickly and crouching over the distressed pups for longer periods while under a magnetic trance. Having such pinpoint control over specific circuits would be a boon for researchers seeking to map neurological pathways or test novel treatments. In time, similar nanotechnology may even treat poor mental health in humans or play a significant role in therapies for debilitating neurological conditions, thereby returning complete control of a person's mind back to the individuals. Or if imagine the people who enacted the 100 years of humiliation against the Chinese having this technology, right? Imagine the people coming into America committing the genocide against the First Nations people and enslaving the African continent having this technology, right? Imagine the comfort women of China, right, under the sway of this technology. Imagine the CIA, right, with its MK Ultra ideas having this kind of technology. This is definitely a bad idea. This kind of technology should be banned. It absolutely is not something that we should be researching. It is absolutely something we should not be exploring. There is no justification whatsoever for allowing organizations like the CIA access to mind control technology, which is 100% where this is going. Like, you have to be a dumbass to think that's not happening. DM writes, eugenics is already here. They're called smartphones. Can you expand on that a little, DM? Nilo writes, traditionally I've leaned towards the side that you can't get rid of the economic system without getting rid of the country. But lately I wonder if that analysis is wrong, maybe puritanical. No, I think that you can get rid of the economic system without getting rid of the country. Like, Russia did it. Nilo writes, I feel like the scope of crimes of the U.S. makes its national image irredeemable, but is redemption an inherently religious attitude? I guess it's like a baby in the bathwater question. Yeah, Eggs D, this will be pitched as a way to reduce policing. Yeah, just keep everybody docile, right? Like that's the part about this that I think is actually the scariest, is that it's like it's not actually going to be that difficult. Like, it's not like you need to convince people to do something. They're already convincing us to do a bunch of heinous bullshit right now by threatening to withdraw food and shelter. Right? The threat of the removal of food and shelter is what motivates people to do these worthless tasks and get taxed in order to support a genocide. Right? Like, that's what we're already doing now. So now they're going to sprinkle into it the idea of just being docile. That you're just going to wake up and feel like, okay, well, I'm going to go to that pointless, worthless job that nobody should do. Oh, hey, it's my boss. I like my boss. Hey, boss, how are you? Yeah, I'll go do that pointless job that nobody should do. What? Pay my taxes? Okay. I hear there's something going on overseas about it, but it's us fighting the bad guys. We're fighting the bad guys, and we're the good guys, you bet. Did you see the Marvel movie? It was so good to see Tony Stark again. Well, time to go home. Like, we're basically already there, right? Just add in like a little, just like click, click, click. And most of the population will just be like, Da-da. Ignorance is bliss. Just ramp up the bliss. Right? Like, yeah, Brave New World type shit. Fiddleford writes, we have leaders of the union criticizing the bureaucracies, Stalin referring to them as time-saving bureaucrats. Fiddleford continues, doing 1 billion to the power of 1 billion computations is highly challenging on paper. This is one of the issues with the bureaucracy. Never forget, brother writes, just consume. Consume. Yeah, Nilo, they definitely want this for Manchurian-like candidates. Yeah. Well, I mean, like, they don't need Manchurian-like candidates. Like, they've got plenty of candidates. For me, it's just social. It's just control. It's just straight up, like, even if people go, like, I didn't like that. No. They're not going to do anything about it. Right? They'll just make it so that nobody will have the gumption. You're like, hey, we should go down there and stop them. No, it's fine. And that's it. Just docility. Right? They're just going to turn us into cattle. More than they already have. And we'll all just go along with it. It's fine. And even better, if they can convince the cattle that they're smart for doing what they're doing, and the people fighting against it are the dummies, even better, right? Get them to love their slavery. Get them to enjoy their servitude. Get them to think that they're super clever and they're super smart, and clearly they must be. They're rich. They're getting rewarded for doing it, right? Yeah, but I got all this money and I have all this status and I have all this privilege. Look at me, I'm super great. I've climbed the chain. You must be the dummy because you refuse to participate in this genocidal project. Zummerman, good to see you. So a biological change is needed to make the subject susceptible to the magnetic mind control field. Sounds like a horrendous idea on a planet with a natural dynamic magnetic field along man-made ones. Well, you're kind of touching on something, Zummerman, that I think about us pretty widely, which is that we don't know anything. Like, the shit that we're researching is so fucking stupid. Like, it's so dumb. Like, why don't we spend more time looking at the bottom of the ocean? Like, why aren't we spending more time getting to know our environment? Like, our entire mode of thinking has poisoned the way we think about reality. And that mode of thinking is that individuals are sacred, right? A single individual is completely sacred. And that individualism is the sacred chalice, God King of all things. So selfishness is the best way to operate. And to be a selfish person is to be a good person. Selfishness is goodness. And and so everything that we pursue and research and explore and think about in this plane of reality has to attach to this idea of how is this good for an individual? How is this good for me? How does this make my life better? How does this improve my quality of life? How is this a new toy that I can engage with, right? Well, Marxists understand that individuals... Hold on, let me say it this way. So individuals have this mindset that says reality is created from within the individual outward, right? And that's true to a certain degree. We do have the ability to change our environments, right? We do have that ability as humans. We can enter an abstract space, explore that abstract space, and then manifest things from the abstract space into reality. We can alter our reality. Other creatures can do this too. Beavers can do this. Right? They build dams. They alter their reality to make conditions more better, to make conditions better for them, right? So we're not the only ones that can do this. The trouble is that the individualist mindset excludes another component that definitely exists, which is that your environment determines most of your behavior. That if you're living in an environment where the only thing that you can find to eat is a cup of rice, that's going to dramatically alter your behavior. If you live in an environment that is lush and rich and natural and everything around you is healthy and beautiful and wonderful, then that's going to change your behavior. That humans are affected by their environment. That our environment has a lot to do with our behavior and a lot to do with the way that we operate and the way that we act. And we do absolutely no research and we pay no attention whatsoever to our environment. And so whenever we research anything, it's always just what kind of bauble or doodad or thing can I have for myself in order to project my own image outward. Or to, if there is a conversation about altering the environment, it's your personal space. It's your personal environment. And and there's no conversation whatsoever about like, hey, wait a minute, like our cities could be like forests. We could live in like these pristine, dynamic environments that are like, we could have like transit systems that are incredible. We could live in natural environments. Everything could be like beautiful and we could be surrounded by wilderness and wildlife, right? Like that could 100% exist. We could for sure do this. But because we're stuck in this individualistic mindset, we just don't even research how to do it. We don't know anything at all. Joan Blue over on Twitch says that's because every clever form of scientific production is first a political project. So if the political project is to maintain the capitalist social form, then the science will be as well. Yeah, I think that's accurate. I think that's right. Fiddleford writes, it's just the computerization of the planned economy. There are comrades out there talking about this. The Tijapa, I don't know who that is, or Thomas Harden covers this. Paul Cockshot. I feel like you just wrote that so I could say Paul Cockshot. The issue, of course, with any kind of computerization of any kind of planned economy is that if you're like this is why I am deeply skeptical of these tech bros that keep talking about, yeah, bro, we'll just do AI with a basic income, bro. Yeah, that's what we'll do. Everybody will get laid off, but we'll do AI to make sure, or we'll do a basic income to make sure everything's doing that. Yeah, right? I'm very, very skeptical of these losers because there's no actual serious analysis being done on a level that actually says, hey, do you see how there's an ownership class? There's a bourgeois class and a working class. Since when has the bourgeois class done anything at all to benefit the working class ever in its entire history? Right? That at best, what they might allow you to have is like a little coffin space that your landlord makes, it makes you cost $3,000 to live in. Never Forget Brother writes, everybody gets laid? Yeah, that's the problem, right? Nobody's getting laid. Like, Joe writes, this is where the cult of science has gotten us. I don't actually care too much for the cult of science idea. Like, it's science. It's capitalism, right? Like, it's not the cult of science, it's the cult of capitalism. That science is itself like just a method, it's just a methodology, right? And if you want to make a nuclear bomb from science, you can do that. And if you want to make a cure for polio with science, you can do that, right? It's like a hammer. Like there's no cult of hammers. The trouble is capitalism. The trouble is the system of capitalism, and that it isn't. It's only interested in pursuing ever increasing profits for selfish individuals in a chaos system. That's all it is. Oh, cult of the self. My bad. My bad. I got this little heart down here, and sometimes it blocks the message. So sorry. Joe Anthony, for correction's sake, says he didn't say the cult of science. He said the cult of the self has gotten us. That's correct, Joe. We can agree on that for sure. And the I think I'm just getting a little tired because I'm over here on Twitch and somebody on Twitch is correcting me about something I said as well. Uh-oh. That's okay, Joe. The yeah, the cult of the self. Oh yeah, dude. I hope that I'm alive to see a rise in consciousness in the populace in a much more serious and dramatic way, where people finally start to actually say, okay, we've actually got to do something serious about this, that we actually cannot continue forward in this way. Part of the thing that makes me a bit hopeful for the future is that all of the demographics show that the worldview of millennials, Gen Z, and Gen Alpha is essentially inverted. That what the boomers have believed is not what these next generations believe. And that as the boomers begin to die off and as they begin to lose power, or as the demographic begins to die off, the institutions that they uphold will lose power, and they will either have to respond to the next generations or they will die off. And that's just going to happen, right? Like, nobody under the age of 50 is walking around. I shouldn't say nobody, but it is like a dramatically small percentage of people compared to the majority of people. Like, very few people are still denying the existence of climate change. Like, it's become a very fringe position, like Holocaust denial, right? Like, sure, there's plenty of people out there that still do this, but like, not enough to support like a major agenda. Okay, Stalin, I asked you to do it, and then you didn't do it. So, rule number 2 is basic politeness, okay? If you can't be basically polite in the chat, you don't belong here. The statement is as clean as this. If you're not smart enough to be polite, you're not smart enough to be here. You're not smart enough to talk to. Okay? Please do not call regulars idiots. Please do not insult people actively. Not interested. Goodbye. Yeah, don't worry about what this guy was talking about or spreading around. DM writes, of the smartphones, what I meant was electromagnetic signals from cell phones can change or manipulate one's brainwaves and behavior, which is what capitalists want in order for us to buy their product. I mean, that's an interesting idea, right? Like, that's, I mean, we're getting into like, let's just put it on and just say like this. Here at the Canadian Commie, sometimes we have conversations about conspiracies and conspiracy theories, and we try to have fun with conspiracy-minded thinking. Is it possible for a cell phone to emit an electromagnetic pulse or a signal that can change or manipulate one's brainwaves and behavior to make us more docile consumers? The TV and radio do this plenty. Yeah, that's fair enough. Cotton, good to see you. You just missed my... I knew that this was going to set you off, dude, so I'll just say it. Scientists mind-controlled mice remotely in Extraordinary Worlds First. Yeah, I'm sure the capitalists won't use that for nothing, right? I'm sure everything will be completely fine. It's so amazing how screwed we are. Like, isn't it? It's just so amazing how totally screwed we are. Yes, fresh new hell, I see. Yeah, thank you. Like, it is bad enough that we have these smartphones going around, right? Like, it is bad enough that we have all this, like, people are getting skeptical of, like, the Wi-Fi symbol. Anemone says that she misses the number draw. You know what, Anemone? I miss the number draw too. For those of you who are new, there was a period of time when David Lynch, for some reason, was doing a number draw. Oh, well, thank you so much, Nilo, with a $10 donation. I appreciate it. For your air conditioner fund, stay cool. That's kind of you, Nilo. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. A good opportunity to say like, share, subscribe. If you would like to donate, patreon.com/thecanadiancommie. Thank you, Nilo. I appreciate it. David Lynch, of all people, was doing a daily number draw where he was drawing a number between 1 and 10. And people were like commenting on it. People were keeping track of it. And now everybody in the chat picking a number between 1 and 10. Let's do it. Okay, everybody. Here we are. July 31st, 2028. Everybody pick a number. The number you see on the screen is not the number. Everybody pick a number between 1 and 10. Swirl the numbers. All right, so I see a 6. I see an 8. I see another 8. Is anybody else going to get in on this? I'm going to hit this go button. And whatever number that is, you will be the winner. Zummerman in with a 7. Gabriel with a 3. Good to see you, Gabriel. Anybody else coming in? How many people are listening right now? I got 15 people in YouTube. I got 5 people over on Twitch right now. Massaro with a 5. DM with a 9. All right, I'm going to do a countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Massaro over on Twitch with a 5. You are today's winner, Massaro. Congratulations. First time commenter. First time in the chat. First comment made. Number 5. You're a winner. You're welcome, Massaro. You are welcome. Cotton, I know, it's deeply upsetting when you lose a draw for nothing. It's absolutely deeply upsetting. I understand. Dude, I should absolutely bring back the number draw. I should just do it. It was easy. It was simple. I don't have a jar, DM. I don't have a jar. Come on. Why are you guys trying to make it official? Doesn't it have to be drawn from a jar and kissed by the Pope? Shouldn't it be drawn from a jar that has ping pong balls in it, and shouldn't the person who draws it be David Lynch? If it's not drawn by David Lynch, then I don't see why we care. So, pivoting, Nature.com has released a new article, a new study rather, where they have found out that, shock and surprise and awe, the global south is producing 90% of the labor and receiving 20% of the wage. Isn't that great? I'm not going to read the whole article on stream. As you can see, it is very diverse, very thorough, right? With all of the graphs hitherto therein. Let's see if we can just get like a concluding paragraph. No. So like now we're doing scientific studies that are basically just confirming everything Karl Marx said was true. Yeah, efficient and rational distribution, yeah? It makes all the sense in the world. Yeah, gasp! Who could have known? It makes all the sense in the world, right? It makes all the sense in the world that the poor do the work and the rich do fuck all, right? It's almost as though it's a class-based society. It's almost though there are classes. Oh, dude, I want to read this one. Surprise Pikachu face. I know, right? Okay, I am going to go use the washroom, so forgive me for a moment while I run off. And then we're going to read an article entitled, A Biblical View of Work and Welfare. Huh? Are you guys excited? I'm excited. So, why do I care? Why do I care about the Bible? And it's because there's a whole segment of the society that pretends to be Christian. And this guy, Jason Matera, I assume, is one of these people who's fixing to cosplay as a Christian. I love it when they write shit down, because it makes it really obvious that they are heretical frauds. That they hate their Christ, that they despise everything about him. And when they write this stuff down, they make it really obvious. Christians are supposed to be at the tip of the spear in alleviating poverty, especially when it comes to other believers. Already, especially when it comes to other believers, eh? The tale of the Good Samaritan that was told by, Jesus Christ, is specifically a story about how, even though the Samaritan was not of the same ethnicity or religion or race or creed as the person he was helping, he did so anyway, because it was the right thing to do. So when you say, especially when it comes to other believers, I think you're already a heretical loser. Because you don't give a fuck about Christ. You don't give two shits at all about Jesus Christ. You're a fraud, and it's obvious. That doesn't mean, however, that we are under any obligation to help indolent bums. What's an indolent bum? Who defines what that is? Right? Because I assume that you, a fraud, believe that an indolent bum is a person who gets abandoned by the system of capital. Because you have no analysis and you despise your Christ, obviously. So, such people are not entitled to our generosity. Christ says so, but okay. You don't care about him. They have chosen the path of poverty. What a fucking loser this guy is. Have you heard that requiring able-bodied adults to work as a condition for receiving taxpayer-funded welfare is despicable? True story, according to Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts. That's not all. Apparently, tying government welfare to the prospect of work is also profoundly destructive. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and will take food out of the mouths of kids. Representative Pete Aguilar of California. Yeah, it's slavery, right? Like, go to work or you don't get to eat, right? So we're gonna make you go do work that you wouldn't otherwise be willing to do, or else you'll starve in the streets. It sounds like a form of slavery. You know, the kind of thing your Christ fought against. Although you don't care about him, nor do you read his words. So, unsurprising that you, a person who cosplays as a Christian, would be unaware of this. It could be racist, too, declared Representative Pramila Jayapal of Seattle. All of these things disproportionately affect poor people, people in rural areas, black, brown, indigenous folks. Right, you know, the people that you don't care about. Right? Take a deep breath, libs. You know that they're unserious when they say libs, right? Like this is how you know it's about as unserious as it gets. Libs. So, are conservatives on Capitol Hill really advocating for policies that would undermine the republic, snatch mac and cheese from the forks of hungry toddlers, and target minorities in the process? Yes, very obviously. Like, very obviously. I can show you Project 2025, my man. Like, I know you don't read, that's why you don't know anything about your Christ, but I can show you Project 2025. It is very nakedly an effort that is extremely racist in order to undermine the republic, very nakedly, make people hungry, very nakedly, and target minorities very nakedly. Like, very, very nakedly. In like a 1 + 1 = 2 kind of way. I know you're not that literate, but 1 and 1 make 2, right? Hardly. To catch you up to speed, House Republicans in the Biden administration finally agreed in principle to increase the nation's debt ceiling, meaning that the United States government would authorize us to accrue new debt at least till 2025 when we get through to the entire ordeal all over again. Lucky us. So, literally, like, that's literally how your country works. Like, that's the entire, who cares? I don't get it. Basically, the deal keeps discretionary, what you've put in quotations to show us that you want us to emphasize discretionary, although I don't think you know what discretionary means. Basically, the deal keeps discretionary government spending roughly flat in the short term and merely cuts the rate of such spending after that. Considering that the country's debt hovers at $31.8 trillion and counting, this pending agreement is hardly a heroic display of fiscal leadership by either political party. Who has the debt? Where's the debt coming from? Oh, it's the money doesn't matter, right? So here you are basically revealing that you forgot to read the section of the Bible that says a man cannot serve both money and God, right? You know the section of the Bible where they say that you can't serve both money and God, and you're choosing to serve money, right? You're choosing to treat money like it's a real thing that actually exists, like you would a God. And instead of actually serving your Bible or your God, because you're a fraud, right? Like, very nakedly. It's so amazing how fraudulent you are. These fake Christians who are illiterate, who have never read their Bible, keep trying to tell us to venerate money and wealth and power and status above their God, who they hate, clearly. That said, House conservatives were able to bolster work requirements as a precondition for receiving public support, which is a victory of sorts. More slavery is good. As the Wall Street Journal notes, the tentative deal would largely require able-bodied, low-income adults without dependents between the ages of 18 and 54 to work to receive food aid, up from the current top age of 49. Just to underscore the point, existing federal welfare law mandates that adults under 50 years old must punch in at least 20 hours a week at an office or attend a job training seminar if they are physically capable of doing so. This is like one step away of just drafting people, right? If you want to eat, then you got to go to war. I wonder if there's any precedent. I wonder if there's anybody who maybe spoke out against such practices. I don't know. Maybe some Christ of some kind. Who's to say? The proposal under scrutiny would bump that top line age to 54. This meager expansion is what all the fuss is about. Exceptions to these proposed rules abound, by the way. They reportedly wouldn't cover veterans, homeless people, and young people leaving foster care, among the myriad exemptions that are already in effect. It's amazing how hard you're working to keep food out of people's mouths while your Christ was literally going around giving free food to people. Right? Isn't it interesting, right? Like, there's the story of feeding the 5,000 where Christ takes some loaves of bread and then he splits them up and he just feeds everybody with them. He didn't say, how much work have you done? Right? There wasn't like a make work project that needed to happen in order to justify people having food, because civilized people believe that people should just have food and shelter, right? That they shouldn't have to work for capitalists, the people you actually worship, because you're not a Christian, obviously, you're just a capitalist, cosplaying as a Christian. That they shouldn't have to work for capitalists in order to justify their existence, right? The capitalists being the ones that withhold food and shelter in the first place, right? Because that's what this is actually all about. See, if you had have actually read the Bible, you would actually understand that Christ was against the idea of the state owning people and owning everybody. That we should focus on larger concepts, right? Larger ideas, like God. That we should ask bigger questions, and that people who withhold food and shelter from other people in exchange for labor are bad, in fact. And yet, for whatever reason, you've decided to just ignore your Christ, pay no attention whatsoever to the circumstances around his crucifixion, and venerate the people who are withholding food and shelter while pretending to be a Christian. It's very weird, very strange thing that these people do. The suggested debt ceiling deal would also update obsolete calculation. I don't know why you care about the debt ceiling. Like, you clearly don't understand basic economics, right? Like, the debt ceiling going up is, like, irrelevant. It essentially doesn't matter, right? They make a big deal out of it, but it's just bullshit. Like with the spending side of the ledger, we're not talking about sweeping reforms here. Come on! Put more people to work into their old age, just like how Christ would have wanted. Whatever the word that describes an action a notch below modest, that's what this compromise bill is. Come on! It's just a little. It's unsightly, but at least we're not moving in the wrong direction. In fact, there's a clear worldview implications for Christians to consider on the topic of work and welfare. For starters, the Bible endorses the ethic of work as one visible demonstration of a virtuous Christian life. For instance, when addressing the fledgling church communities in Thessalonica, the Apostle Paul explicitly warns them about lazy behavior. For even when we were with you, we would give you this command: if anyone is not willing to work, let him not eat. For we hear that some among you walk in idleness, not busy at work, but busy bodies. Now such persons we command and encourage in the Lord Jesus Christ to do their work quietly and to earn their own living. Aha! So we're just going to detach our entire analysis from the system of capital. We're going to pretend as though capitalism doesn't exist, and then we're going to use the Bible as a justification in order to enforce enslavement. You're a heretic, right? Very cleanly. In like a very, very obvious sort of way, right? That Jesus Christ himself would look at what you're doing here and he would condemn you for it because you're a fraud. Very obviously. Yeah, notice how the passage isn't framed as a suggestion, it's expressed as a command. If we're all going to emulate godly character. Yeah, keeping kids hungry, godly character. Of course, Christians are supposed to be at the tip of the spear in alleviating poverty, especially when it comes to other believers. That doesn't mean, however, we're under any obligation to help indolent bums. Indolent bums being described as anybody who won't work for capitalists, right? If you refuse to sell yourself into slavery, you're an indolent bum. Okay, what's going on in my chat? I need to pause for a second. We have somebody, despicable one. Good start. Okay, but clearly there's no just and benevolent God if he's out here designing creatures. Oh, okay. We can just ban you. Rule 2, right? Just basic humanity, right? No reason to talk to somebody who's too stupid to be polite. Alright, I think I'm good with this fraud over here. Dealing with the fraud over here. Hey, Stomps, you came on over here. And then we've got another fellow over here. Ganner. Can I ask a wild question about politics? Yeah, of course, dude. That's literally the reason I'm here. Stomps, what country do you think can take a leading role in uprooting capitalism and spreading communism in the future world? I think that what you're looking at is China. Right? That China is the country that is very clearly moving away from systems of capital while having to deal with systems of capital. It is steadily moving itself in the direction away from systems of capital and building up its own productive forces in the meantime. That they have, that if you look at the history of China, and I can get into the history of China, because most people, when they hear me talk this way, the very first thing that they will think to themselves is, well, but China has capitalism in it, right? China's a capitalist nation, isn't it? That's essentially the analysis that I get, even from Western Marxists, is, oh, but China has the gap. But there are McDonald's in China. And so China is a capitalist nation, and so we should expect it to operate along capitalist principles, right? So this kind of snapshot material analysis of what's happening in China like a year ago is only a half-complete analysis. And when you've got a half-complete analysis, you can never be successful. That if you actually look at the history of China, what you will see is a nation that has always been pursuing communist ideas and communist thoughts while simultaneously having to deal with the realities, the material realities of the system of capital. That they get put into a position where the capitalists basically say to them, you're going to deal with us one way or the other. That the PRC, the People's Republic of China, is formed in 1949. And in 1950, the Americans invade Korea and destroy it. And then begin the process of invading Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, and just absolutely level these places to the ground, creating enormous wars and strife. We also have wars in Bangladesh, right? So absolutely destroying everything in this area that they possibly can. Reminding everybody that 2 nuclear bombs were dropped on Japan in 1946, 3 years before the formation of the PRC. And so China just comes to realize, and then on top of all of that, the relationship between China and Russia deteriorates significantly into the Sino-Soviet split because of the death of Joseph Stalin. And the Russians begin a process of Western appeasement, which essentially forces the Chinese to pivot their strategy and also pursue a position of American appeasement, capitalist appeasement. And so they have to bend the knee. They're not permitted to do anything else. That the choice is between never-ending godless war or this new idea that gets brought forward by Deng Xiaoping and the Dangists, which is we could have peace. And what these capitalists are suggesting to us, communists, Marxists, is that they're going to bring the means of production into China, and then China will own the means of production, and we'll make all their stuff for them. And so for a period of time, we will have to make all their stuff on the cheap. But what it's going to allow us to do is it's going to allow us to build our productive forces to such a point that we will be able to do whatever we want and no one will be able to tell us we can't. And it's working. That this idea of Deng Xiaoping's did exactly what he said it was going to do, and really proved to everybody that Karl Marx was correct, that the Chinese have a better handle on how economics and society works, and that the American theory of economics is false. The American theory of economics being the profit motive, right? That individuals operate in their own interests in a free market system. And that idea of economics doesn't work. And that the Chinese economics, Marxism, does work. This allows China to experience an enormous rapid growth. Just an absolute insane amount of growth happens in China over the next 30 years until you reach Xi Jinping. And Xi Jinping launches a decorrupting campaign. Because one of the things that Deng Xiaoping acknowledged and said what was going to happen is that the capitalists would attempt to take over the National People's Congress, the ruling party, the ruling class, or the ruling system of China. And they would attempt to take over the CPC, the Communist Party of China. And so Xi Jinping launches a anti-corruption campaign in order to pull out the capitalist elements that have begun to take root within the party. That happened 10 years ago. And it really pays to remember that the organization that Mao built, Mao Zedong, the revolutionary leader that created the People's Republic of China, a communist through and through, the same organization that Mao built was the same organization that Deng led, was the same organization that Zemin led, that Hu Jintao led, and that Xi Jinping currently leads. And that at no point during that thread was there a break, that there was a continuation. At no point was the country led by a capitalist. That Deng Xiaoping was put in the unfortunate situation of having to enact capitalist reforms from the threat of a barrel of a gun. But the National People's Congress was always communist, and still is communist, to this very day. The biggest success, I think, that the Chinese communists have had is that their banks are owned by the state. That the communists have control of the banks. There isn't a private banking system in China. The Chinese communists have been very wise about where to let capitalists in. So, for example, most of the resources in China are owned by the state. So a private company can come in and they can operate in China, but if they want resources, then they have to negotiate with the communists. And if they want financing, then they have to negotiate with the communists. And so China finds itself in this kind of place of negotiation where it constantly needs to be negotiating with the capitalists. But what it's sought to do is it's sought to learn as much as they can from the capitalists. So, for example, building, right? Before the Americans came in with their investments into China, China didn't really build big cities, not in the way that America did. They didn't build the Empire State Building, right? Well, now they're masters at it. And who did they learn that from? The Americans. So they took the good and they took the bad. And now what you end up with, right? You end up with a communist party that is in control of their banks, their resources, that are negotiating with foreign capital. But what's beginning to happen is that China is beginning to build its own institutions. So there's like a Chinese McDonald's, and there's like a Chinese Gap, and there's a Chinese Adidas, and there's a Chinese version of iPhones, right? That Chinese versions of these American companies are beginning to pop up all over China, and they're beginning to outcompete with the foreign market, which is pushing all this foreign capital, or all these foreign capitalists rather, out of the country. And that and there are entire systems of private enterprise that are beginning to fail and collapse as the communists predicted. Right? Deng Xiaoping and Xi Jinping both have predicted that systems of capital will fail in China, because that's what systems of capital do. Right? Systems of capital fail. And when they fail, we, the Communist Party of China and the National People's Congress, will take control of it. This is a process that I call pruning the garden, that as pieces begin to decay within Chinese society, the Chinese will just break off the branch and throw it away to keep the tree alive. Right? They'll pick whatever fruit they can get out of it. But what they're not going to do, and what they've never done, is they're not going to bail the capitalists out. Every single time there's a capitalist-caused crisis in China, the process has been very straightforward. Bail out the workers, bail out the citizens, expropriate assets, make the capitalists pay for it, and put the capitalists in jail for doing it. That's what the Chinese have been doing. Xi Jinping, the current leader of China, has enacted a major poverty reduction campaign. People have, of course, questioned how successful it has been, and has questioned the claims made by the CPC. But even with their reduced claim, it's still lifting millions and millions of people out of poverty. It's the most concerted poverty reduction plan that has ever been enacted, perhaps in human history. The Chinese, and it happened under Xi Jinping and the Chinese communists. China's strategy moving forward is to not just transfer the means of production from America to China, which has already happened. China already owns the means of production. Like, the means of production are within China's borders, but now they're moving into the new phase, which is to transfer ownership of those companies, of those assets, from American foreign capital and European foreign capital to Chinese capital, right? So that the ownership is now within China. And it's through this so this is the transition that China is currently experiencing today. And then the next transition, the next phase, will be as these capitalist enterprises begin to fail and begin to not work out correctly, we, the communists, will decide whether or not to simply allow it to fail, or when it does fail, will we take control of it? And that's the position that China is in today. China, of course, has also, and I think this is very wise of them to have done, China takes the position that communism will rise in other countries by its own method. They're not fundamentalists. This is something I really, 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 really like. I am in awe of them for this. That they have taken a purposeful policy. It's very obvious that they've had very long conversations about this. And they have chosen on purpose to say it is up to every individual nation to come to communism and to come to this idea through their own history and through their own method. That there is no one way to come to communism. And so in that way, China is essentially just enacting, it's just attempting to make itself strong and to be a beacon, to be to be something for other nations to look to be there's a word for this and I'm blanking on it all of a sudden. To be an icon, to be a role model for the world to look to. That their goal is not to go to other countries and make those other countries like China. In fact, one of the things that I really value about China is like there's the concept of the manifest destiny in America, and what this has led the Americans to believe is we're the greatest country in the world, and so we need everybody to be like us. That everything will be better when everybody's like us. And so we're going to go into your country and we're going to destroy it. And we're going to do all this kind of stuff, right? Well, China says we're the greatest country in the world. So stay out of here. Get out of here. We don't want you coming in here and messing with us. Right? We're the greatest. And we're happy with who we are and we like who we are and we're going to stay being who we are. And we don't need you coming in here messing with us. And we're certainly not going to go over there and mess with you. And the only time China goes over to another country is to negotiate with them and to say to them, like, hey, we can't help but notice. So, for example, in the case of the DRC, hey, we can't help but notice that you've got 80% of the world's cobalt. Democratic Republic of Congo. Can we get some mines? Can we buy these mines? Can we invest in your mines? And the DRC says, okay, but we don't have electricity or roads or anything. We don't have any basic infrastructure to get into these places in the first place. And China says, well, maybe we can do something about that. Maybe we can make a deal. Maybe we can build a rail. Maybe we can put in some electricity. Maybe we can do this kind of stuff. And the DRC is like, we don't have the money to do this, right? We're very poor. And China goes, don't worry about that. Here, we'll float you a loan, right? And then the DRC says, okay, but like we're not going to be able to pay back that loan. And China goes, yeah, don't worry about it. It's just money, right? We're not here for money. We're here for cobalt, right? We want the cobalt because the cobalt is how we build the products, which is what we want. We don't care about the money. We care about the thing. We care about the asset because we're Marxists. We're materialists. We believe in we don't care about the financialization part of it so much. Like, we understand why financialization exists. We understand why finances exist. We understand why currencies exist, but we're not going to worship them. We're not going to burn down this project so that we can get access to money. We're going to enact this policy so we can get access to the goods, so we can get access to the stuff. And so they go in and they offer this deal to the DRC, and the DRC says, you know what? No, we don't like this deal. It's no good. In fact, we're afraid of you. And so China goes, maybe we can sweeten the deal. Maybe we can make it a better deal. Maybe we can negotiate a better deal. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? What do you think about this? What do you think about that? And the DRC is not used to this. They're not used to foreign powers coming up to them and being like, hey, do you want to negotiate? How can we make this a win-win? How do we make it so that you guys prosper and we prosper as well? How do we make it so that we get access to the cobalt and then you also get access to something that you want? And the DRC is not used to this. Right? They're used to Americans coming in and blowing them up and stealing their shit and throwing their children into mine shafts. That's what they're used to. And so the DRC is like, okay, cool. Like, this is better. These guys are talking to us like we're people. These guys are talking to us like we have ideas and our ideas are good. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. And so they make the deal. Right? And this is how China is operating in the world. China's not trying to expand its borders. It's not trying to have big fights. It's not trying to do any of that kind of stuff. The borders that China have are basically set since 1949. right? It's not interested in taking over Mongolia, Kazakhstan, right? Kyrgyzstan, any of this kind of stuff. If it does take over any of this, it'll be through diplomacy, right? It's not going to force itself into Vietnam, for example, right? There's going to be a scuffle over Taiwan, but that's going to be because of America, as usual. And so moving forward into the into the future, right? China is going to be developing itself, moving towards communism. Xi Jinping says that it could take as long as 10 generations. That it could be 10 generations of development in order to get there. I think it could be done in a quicker timeline, but I understand why he doesn't want to pressure things. Because the biggest problem that China has is alienating the West. That China learned by watching what happened in World War II, by watching what happened on their border with Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, and Korea, by watching what occurred when communism was first rising on the world stage. They learned very, very, very straightforwardly, do not alienate the West. No, we're not communists over here. What are you talking? Socialism. We got socialism with Chinese characteristics over here. You know, it's like how you got Denmark. Right, they're socialists. They say that they're socialists. Well, we're socialists too, with Chinese characteristics. That's fine. That's fine. You want to do business? We'll do business. Let's buy some treasury bonds. It's fine. You're going to buy our goods? Yeah, everything's fine. Please don't come over here and bomb us. Like, one of the big failings of Western Marxists, and I consider it and I will be harsh about it, because I think it's a massive oversight, just a major oversight, is that Western Marxists refuse to be serious about the subject of war. And they refuse to believe or to attach the concept of war to the way that China thinks about the world. That China experienced the century of humiliation. China experienced the Vietnam War. China experienced the Korean War. China saw Japan get nuked. Like, if you're genuinely sitting there trying to tell me that China needs to cast off the shackles of bourgeois capital and rise above, I was like, okay, cool. So which city is going to get nuked then? Because that's what you're saying. You creepy little ultra. Like, which city is going to get nuked? How many millions of Chinese citizens are you willing to sacrifice to pursue your religious ideology? So for the materialists in the conversation, so for the people who are serious in the conversation, do not alienate the West. They will murder you. And so that's what China's up to. And that's what China's doing. And that most of the rest of the world, most of the rest of the world's population is looking at China and looking at its swift rise, looking at its poverty reduction, looking at its wealth and what it's managed to do in a fractionally short period of time. And they're saying, God damn, how do we do that? God damn, how do we do that? How do we do what the Chinese did? How do we get in on this? And that's Russia that's saying that. That's India that's saying that. That's South Africa that's saying that. That's the DRC that's saying that. That's huge sections of Africa that are saying that. That's Korea that's saying it. That's Vietnam, that's Laos, that's Cambodia that's saying it. Right? Anybody who shares a border with China is looking at China going, God damn. How do we get a piece of that? And that's how communism is going to spread back into the world. It's going to spread back into the world because China is sitting there being like, yeah, we negotiated with the capitalists. We showed you all that they're fucking illiterate boobs. And as the United States collapses into an internal civil war, And as the United States collapses into its own internal turmoil and the empire begins to degrade, it's going to be the Chinese. And I am under the belief, and I will defend the position, that China is ruled by a revolutionary communist party that has always been a revolutionary communist party that has needed to deal with and negotiate the real, actual material conditions that exist in the world, and doesn't have the perspective of a 20-year-old white guy from America. It's got the perspective, the 4,000-year perspective of Chinese civilization. So, that's my answer to that question, Stomps. That it's coming from China. And it's going to continue coming from China. CH, you've said a lot of stuff. I'm just going to answer Ben very quickly. Thoughts on the Venezuelan election? Yeah, good for you, Maduro. Socialist keeps winning. And the Americans keep doing exactly what they're going to do, which is assault them. Right? So it's not a news story. Right, Ben? It's the same thing. Over and over and over again. Ganner over on Twitch, still waiting for that wild question about politics. CH has written, China deals correctly with capitalists. China studies poverty and then solves it. When capitalist bosses fail, the workers deserve a chance to select new bosses. China will finance this, but probably not impose it. Oh, China will finance this, but probably not impose it. China intends to study and learn from other countries' communication process. Yet China has extreme confidence in itself. So do Vietnam, France, Mexico. And these countries are impossible for the U.S. to understand. Marxists know money is easily printed trash. Trained, productive workers aren't. This is what enrages the West the most. China, Russia, and India are actually negotiators. All have experience of being targeted and underestimated. So they can deal laterally, very happily, without having to control everything. Star Trek is actually the Communist Party of China spread into space. Star Trek should be sold to a Chinese company so they can honestly show this. Yes, Marx wrote all of his books before World War I, and the true industrial scale of warfare, yeah. Not even the U.S. Civil War happened when the manifesto was written. So it's not surprising that Lenin, Stalin, Mao, Ho Chi Minh had to work out their own approaches to major conflicts. Deng, Khrushchev, etc. actually figure out how to de-escalate with the Genocide 7 and NATO. Yeah, China is basically on track in material terms, and the confusion in the West is deliberate. I don't think the confusion in the West is deliberate. I think that the West has been operating on a false economic theory that doesn't work. And that false economic theory, which is now a religious ideology, because if a scientific theory is shown to be false, then all that remains is the religious dogma, right? And so the religious dogma is what they're running on now, and that religious dogma is individuals seeking personal profit in a free market system. That's the theory that they're running on. That worship money for myself in a chaotic system. Don't plan, don't do anything. And so you can actually see it when you read the Economist articles. Anytime they write articles about China, I read them on my chat, on my stream all the time. Right? I read all the time Economist articles that are constantly talking about what China is doing in this very confused, but who's going to make the money? China is making all these solar panels, and it's just cratering the value of solar energy, and it's just cratering the value of solar panels because they're making so many. Well, how are they going to keep doing that? Who's going to make the money? Because under capitalism, the purpose is the money. It's the only thing that anybody should care about is the money. Meanwhile, the Chinese are sitting there going, what the fuck? We don't care about the fucking money. We care about the power. We care about the solar power generation. That's what we care about. We don't care if solar energy is isn't gonna make us any money. We care if it can run our cities. We care if it can run our society. We care if we can charge batteries with it and drive cars with it and fly ships with it. That's what we care about. We don't care about money. What are you talking about? Well, you think cities of the future are going to care about money? No, we care about the power. We care about the power generation. We want 1 billion solar panels printed as fast as possible, and we want to put them everywhere. And we don't give a fuck who makes any money. And this just baffles capitalists because their religious ideology is false, right? And it baffles them in the same way as saying, you know, I don't think Jesus Christ is coming back anytime. Baffles Christians. They're just baffled by that. They're like, yeah, of course he is. He died for our sins. He's coming back. The death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, the most important moment in human history. And Jesus Christ coming back at any moment. And you standing there being like, probably not, bro. Right? Say, it's heresy. It's like, hey, you're sinful. You're going to burn in hell forever. Okay, champ. Whatever you say. So it's this religious ideology that has taken hold in the West, where they literally cannot see clearly. It has obfuscated their view. And the proof is in the pudding. That for all the naysaying that's going to come out of The Economist, and for all the naysaying that's going to come out of the system of capital, the Chinese are just going to keep building. And they're just going to keep building their productive capacity. And they're just going to keep growing. And they're just going to keep going. And they're just going to do. And the Americans are going to watch it happen. And the whole time they're just going to be like, but they're not making any money. And the Chinese are just going to be like, who gives a fuck? Who gives a fuck? Like, enjoy your billionaires, I guess. Like, enjoy your Warren Buffetts and your Bill Gates and your Elon Musks and your David Thompsons and your Jeff Bezoses. Like, congratulations, America. You got a bunch of billionaires, looks like. Good for you. We're building a moon base. We're actually sending rovers to Mars in order to start building structures. We're actually building a big power grid up here on the moon. We're actually building a space elevator. We're actually building our own space station up here. We're actually building like a shipyard up here. We're actually building industry in space now. We've actually started mining asteroids. And we send those asteroids to the facilities on the moon that we built. And we're sending them to the industry that we've built in space, and all the pollution that it creates doesn't come onto the Earth. It gets spread out into space. And we're increasing our productive capacity this way. And we're actually doing it. And who's making money? Nobody. Because it's not about the money. It never was. Karl Marx didn't write about how much money anybody would make. He wrote about increasing the productive capacity of the nation. That's what we're doing. And while the Americans stew, staring up at the space stations and the industry that the Chinese will build in space, and the new technology and the new breakthroughs and the new way of operating that the Chinese will usher in, they'll just bicker amongst themselves about who has the most value in their own little shitty system. And in 50, 60 years, like, look at where China is now, right? China as an entity is formulated in 1949. Mao dies, I believe, in 1977, in and around there. That's when Dangism begins. So China only begins its economic reforms in like the 80s. So in 50 years, let's say, China has gone from where it was to where it is now. What is it going to look like in 50 years? What is it going to look like in 50 years? What do you think we're going to look like in 50 years? If I was a betting man, I know who I'd be betting on. Well, I think that we've reached the end of this one. Always remember, everybody, each and every one of you is a quantum being walking around in quantum energy. These billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the hopes you'll never realize it. You'll just stay the good little commodity they need you to be. Rebel. Revolt. Repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.